Hello and welcome back. I'm Rob from Tributech, and in today's session, we're going to be asking if the disinformation that we discussed in the previous module could be applied to businesses. Now, shortcut, the answer is absolutely yes. But in the world of business-to-business cybersecurity, these attacks actually have a very specific name, or names, plural. Let me explain.
Firstly, there's data tampering. Data tampering is about modifying existing data. Secondly, there's fake data injection. Fake data injection is what it sounds like. This is about injecting new data into a data stream. And finally, there's data poisoning. This is specifically about machine learning models. The idea with data poisoning is that you feed a machine learning model bad training data so that it learns to make bad decisions instead of good ones. All three of these categories overlap. If you're tampering with data, to some extent, you're basically adding new data in. So they're very similar ideas. And data poisoning is just data tampering applied to a machine learning model. So we'll use these three terms interchangeably.
Okay, so now we have definitions. But what might these attacks look like in real life? Well, let's look at some real scenarios and some real use cases to start to get a better understanding.
Meet Jim. Jim is a security analyst who spends most of his day looking at a security incident and event management platform like Splunk. This software centralizes data coming from lots of different servers, platforms, and systems into one location so that Jim can keep his eyes out for any attacks that might be going on. Meet Jane. Jane is part of a team of people who are building a machine learning model that will enable cars to perform autonomous driving. This machine learning model feeds itself on training data that comes directly from vehicles' driver data. Meet James. James is responsible for overseeing the operations of critical infrastructure, like a water treatment plant. James relies on data coming from sensors within the operational environment to make critical decisions.
Notice how all three of them rely on the data that's coming to them to make absolutely critical decisions. In the case of Jim, when there is a cyber attack going on, he is relying on the system logs coming from various applications, systems, servers, and devices in order to work out what's going on in the business and to identify any serious issues that need to be taken care of. For Jane, she is absolutely reliant on the quality of the data coming from the devices and vehicles. If that data is bad, the machine learning algorithm is trained on the wrong data, and the investment into that massive and important project falls through, and they lose any competitive advantage they have in this fast race to autonomous driving. And for James, well, he's responsible for massive pieces of infrastructure, and he's absolutely reliant on the sensor data that's coming to him in order to make massive, critical decisions. So what's at stake here? Well, we've got the possibility of data breaches, we've got a machine learning algorithm that is responsible for self-driving cars, and we've got scenarios in critical infrastructure that could lead to sewage being released in the environment or a power grid going down. So if someone tampers with the data, there could be massive, game-changing implications.
So if a cybercriminal enters the equation and decides to inject entirely new data or to tamper with the existing data, we can see that the consequences would be incredibly grave. For Jim, this could mean that he misses information about a data breach that's about to occur. For Jane, this means that the massive investment being poured into this machine learning model could fall through. And for James, well, he could end up falling for some fake data that convinces him to make a terrible decision about the operational environment he's responsible for.
So yes, to answer the question that we asked at the beginning of this session, if somebody does get in and tampers with your data or injects fake data or poisons the data, whatever phrase you want to use, the implications for your business can be enormous, and you can understand why it's an attack that you would want to prevent. But what about encryption? Surely if you just encrypt the data whilst it's in transit, this can solve the issue and prevent data tampering or fake data injection.
It's true that if you deploy encryption correctly, it is going to help secure data as it moves from various systems and platforms over to the people that need to use it. However, here are some important facts to bear in mind. Firstly, encryption is exceptionally difficult to configure and is often misconfigured or is applied with too much weakness in environments. As a consequence, it's not unusual for encryption to be cracked, allowing people to get plain text access to traffic and data. Secondly, for many of these use cases, data will be bought and sold and exchanged through multiple businesses. For example, in the automotive industry, when driver data is collected, it might be sold to an intermediary before that intermediary then sells it on to another vendor. The consequence of this is that data is often decrypted before being re-encrypted at multiple stages during its life cycle, opening up the possibility of data tampering and fake data injection. And finally, insider threats are a reality. And even if best practice encryption is applied throughout a data stream's lifecycle, an insider threat could still get access to that data stream and cause significant harm.
So now we can see that these attacks could theoretically happen. We can understand how they could have massive repercussions, and we can see there are gaps in our existing security strategy that allow them to happen today. The next question is, are they happening today? Can we point to real data breaches, and do the numbers and statistics back this up? The answer is yes. Fake data injection, data tampering, and data poisoning are real threats that are happening today. Let me run you through some of the numbers.
Firstly, investment in machine learning and AI is forecast to grow 1,200% in the years between 2020 and 2028. There's going to be a lot more machine learning and AI around, meaning there is more of an attack surface for cybercriminals to attack. Secondly, research shows that if you tamper with just 2% of the training data that is going to a machine learning model, this can lead to a 90% error rate. And finally, Gartner has forecast that 30% of attacks on machine learning models will leverage data poisoning.
All of this has led leading authorities like Microsoft, MITRE, NIST, and ANISA to start building best practice models for how to defend machine learning algorithms from attacks, including data poisoning attacks. For example, Google's artificial intelligence algorithms have already been tricked through data poisoning to misinterpret turtles as rifles. And there are examples of the Chinese firm that convinced a Tesla to drive into oncoming traffic by using data poisoning. When you finish this session, take a moment to Google these stories, as they're absolutely fascinating and really drive home the seriousness of the problem that we're facing.
Research has shown that 98% of all IoT traffic is unencrypted, making it exceptionally easy to intercept and tamper with. 60% of that traffic is over HTTP, meaning it's even easier to find because it's online. And finally, Gartner's research shows that there is a $5 billion black market selling fake sensor data, meaning you actually don't even have to tamper with the data. You can just go onto the black market, buy real data, and then use that to inject it wherever you want.
For more real-world examples that you can Google in your own time, take a look at Abbott Laboratories, who produced pacemakers. They had to recall 500,000 pacemakers out of fears that security gaps would allow hackers to go in, tamper the data, which could effectively change the settings of the pacemakers that were implanted into real patients. Now, you can imagine what some of those implications could be. And for another example, take a look at the US Navy when they had a bunch of ships stationed off the coast of Russia and experienced data tampering of their radars. So, can you attack a business using fake data? Yes, absolutely you can, and the consequences can be devastating. Data tampering, fake data injection, and data poisoning are real threats that businesses need to defend themselves against today. So how can you do it? Well, that's what we're going to cover in the next session. I'll see you there.